The Industrial Revolution was an era which initiated many advances in technology, society, and culture. Beginning in England in the mid-1700s, it gradually spread across Europe and North America. The revolutionary advance in technology was the foundation, leading to changes in the standard of living.
As new machinery was being made, people were creating more efficient ways to travel and produce goods. The creation of steam-powered engines lessened the need for human skill and led to the railroad system, which allowed goods to be transported long distances, unifying the market and building communications.
At the time of the Industrial Revolution, Britain's population witnessed a dramatic growth, increasing over 60% just between the years of 1801 and 1849.
The growing population led to an increase in demand for necessities: food, clothing, shelter, and most importantly, a way of making money.
The decline of the domestic system altered the lifestyle of craftsmen across Great Britain as machines such as spinning frame and power loom began replacing them.
Starting with the very first by Richard Arkwright, the factory held hundreds of workers completing simple tasks in order to complete the end product. Therefore, little skill was required to work in the factory, unlike in the domestic system, which called for craftsmen who needed to complete a product from start to finish.
Remarkably, the development of factories and industrial hubs paved the path for a new lifestyle for the English. The abundance of resources in areas such as Manchester and Bradford suited them as the optimal locations for starting factories. With the rise of industrialism in such areas and the attraction of work came about the roots of modern urbanization.
As these industrial hubs began forming, little thought was given to the workers. Factory owners, who worked for a profit, did not take the measures necessary to ensure safety. Neither safety clothing or equipment was provided for workers.
The high risk of injury led to increasing mortality rates in these cities, but the factories weren't the only things contributing to a low standard of living. The streets were narrow, crowded, and filthy. The lack of a sewer system and low sanitation increased the risk of disease.
Edwin Chadwick, a health reformer of the time, brought forth public health reforms in the sewer systems and water supply. In his sanitary report of Manchester, he wrote,
"Whole streets, unpaved and without drains or main sewers, are worn into deep ruts and holes in which water constantly stagnates, and are so covered with refuse and excrements as to be impassable from depth of mud and intolerable stench."
Disturbed by the impact of industrialization on the English lifestyle, Robert Owen decided to make reforming the system one of his many life goals. Owen was born on May 14, 1771, in Newtown, Wales. He was born to Robert Owen, a saddle maker and ironmonger who was in charge of the local post office.
His mother was a farmer's daughter, and he was the couple's sixth child. Although he later emphasized the role of education in his life, he stopped going to school at the age of 10.
In 1781, he apprenticed under James McGuffog, a cloth merchant. He gave Owen time to study and read.
Through Owen's education, he rejected organized religions, specifically Christianity. He once said,
"By the errors of these systems, he has been made a weak, imbecile animal, a furious bigot and fanatic, or a miserable hypocrite."
Instead of religion, Owen believed the world needs change through social reform. After his apprenticeship, he borrowed £100 from his brother and moved to Manchester to start cotton spinning.
He proceeded to become the manager of the largest cotton mill in Manchester, owned by Peter Drinkwater in 1792. In 1800, Owen became the manager of the new Lanark Mills near Glasgow by marrying the owner's daughter, Caroline.
He also bought 4 textile mills for £60,000 with the help of businessmen in Manchester. He made a fortune at New Lanark by improving the cotton spinning process and making changes in his workforce, like enhancing their living conditions. He also cut down his workers' hours from 11 3/4 hours a day to 10 3/4 hours and made more affordable goods at his company's shop.
Prior to establishing his community at New Harmony, Indiana, Owen had his own theories. Throughout 1813 and 1814, Owen published A New View of Society, also known as Essays on the Principle of the Formation of Character. In these documents, Owen discussed ways to decrease inactivity, crimes, and poverty amongst the lower social classes by discouraging gin shops, pot houses, gambling, and the state lottery.
He wanted to reform punishment and end the monopoly that the Church of England had. He also discussed his opposition to statistics gathered about the demand and value for labor in the country.
In 1815, he wrote observations on the effects of the manufacturing system, claiming that industrialization was the cause of strife in the working classes. Between 1815 and 1817, Owen began trying to solve post-war depression and poverty.
He suggested that poor should be relocated to areas where they can find others with similar interests. For example, people in the countryside would have a common interest in agriculture, so they should all live in a joint community.
Since Owen thought an individual is molded by his or her environment, he believed the creation of a controlled environment would help shape individuals and create order in society.
With this idea in mind, he began to study Anne Lee and the Shakers, which was a utopian experiment in the U.S. taking place less than 20 years before Owen began his research.
Owen, however, was convinced it would work and set his mind to forming a utopian society. He was also motivated by the negative impact of industrialization on England and thus chose the U.S. as the best place to conduct his experiment.
He purchased land in New Harmony, Indiana from a German Protestant sect called Rappites for $135,000.
He met with utopian groups like the Shakers and Rappites, as well as politicians in Washington, to discuss his visions for New Harmony. He relocated to the town in 1824, made 800 spots available for applicants interested in joining his community, and put faith in making his society a success.
Education was emphasized in his community. The school system expanded to include younger children as well as adults, and Owen made changes to the system by emphasizing the teaching of his own philosophy.
He convinced to make his town a model for all others. Owen tried to spread the ideas of the Enlightenment by bringing radical educators and scientists from Europe. There was also equality for both genders in the sense that both men and women had to work.
An interesting concept called time money was enforced, where workers could trade in amount of time worked for items in time stores. Time money became New Harmony's currency, and individuals could obtain money based off of the hours of work completed.
The community went through 2 constitutions because Owen believed his utopia would take 2 steps. Everyone in the first community had to sign the first constitution on May 1st, 1825. The second constitution was created on February 5th, 1828. This constitution had great values, but didn't have enough about the organization of the community. Eventually, none of the members cared enough for the community, and fights often broke out. In 1828, the community fell apart and a disappointed Owen returned to England.
Robert Owen was a firm believer in the possibility of a utopian society being achieved through socialist ideals. He claimed that an individual's surroundings play a heavy role in the way he carries himself and the morals he values. Environment has the power to change man.
Owen did not approve of the factory system because of its cruelty and the treatment of its laborers. He wanted to encourage education, end child labor, improve the unsanitary conditions, reduce working hours, and create insurance plans through the reducing of salary.
Owen wanted the poor to become independent and be able to support themselves. The majority at the time believed that speed and efficiency was the way to go because it was easier and saved money. Owen, however, disliking the free market system, believed that a society should be created to benefit the people, not manufacturers.
Robert Owen did not stop at New Harmony. In 1827, he tried to spread his utopian ideals to parts of Mexico and Texas by creating more communities, but there was less support for his ideas.
After his return to England in the 1830s, Owen tried to create exchange bazaars in which artisans could trade solely on the foundation of cost and labor, thus getting rid of the retail middlemen.
He also tried to establish a community in England. He organized the methods of raising money to initiate the community and was able to get land in Titherley, located in Hampshire.
Despite his efforts, the community failed. The soil in Titherley was poor and resulted in weak harvests. There was little motivation for the community to continue. Robert Owen, however, continued his propaganda campaign by promoting labor exchanges, consumer cooperatives, trade unions, and other organizations made by him.
Owen's idea that an individual is shaped by society was further developed by Karl Marx in the coming decades. Karl Marx began improving his ideas on socialism in the 1840s. His goal developed into the initiation of the overthrow of the capitalist ideals and the start of a socialist society.
He died on November 17, 1858, in Newtown, England. On his deathbed, Owen said,
I gave important truths to the world, and it was only for want of understanding that they were disregarded. I have been ahead of my time.
The Industrial Revolution had changed the way man worked and lived. Just as Owen tried to establish a more suited environment for the workers, the city of Paris was under renovation and urban renewal. From 1853 to 1870, Paris went under dramatic modifications under Haussmann's leadership and was transformed from a crowded medieval city to a modern urbanized capital.
Because of the political unrest in France, it had little opportunity to initiate a move towards industrialization at the turn of the 19th century.
Since the French Revolution, the political powers of France had been constantly shifting from one ruler to another. That is, until the Revolution of 1848 and the rise of Louis Napoleon.
He was chosen by the Republican revolutionaries to become the president of the Second Republic. But it didn't take long for Louis Napoleon to become Napoleon III, and with the Second Empire came great industrialization.
Napoleon III, however, wanted to leave a legacy after his name, and unlike his uncle Napoleon Bonaparte, he focused on improving the industrial and economic foundations of France. Although the French industrialized in a more gradual manner, under the reign of Napoleon III, there was a greater initiation to catch up to Great Britain and urbanize.
As he strove to expand the French Empire overseas, Napoleon III called for the urbanization of Paris. Hoping to rid Paris of its slums and improving the sewage system and waterways, Napoleon commissioned Georges Eugene Haussmann.
Haussmann was born on March 27, 1809, in the city of Paris and lived there most of his life. He studied at the Lycée Henri IV and the University of Paris Law School. He was very active in civil services throughout his career.
In 1831, he was appointed prefect of the Department of the Vienne, and after the Revolution of 1848 and the overthrow of Louis Philippe, he was appointed prefect of the Department of Var. But his most infamous position was as prefect of Seine.
In 1853, Georges Eugene Haussmann replaced Jean-Jacques Berger, the last prefect of Seine who was let go because of his failure to take on such a costly project. As prefect, Berger had started many urban projects throughout France on the request of Napoleon. On June 23, 1858, Berger was appointed to the position of senator as Haussmann replaced him.
With support from Napoleon III, Georges Haussmann was given the power to completely reconstruct Paris, making the city more livable and the use of technology more common.
In the 1850s and 60s, construction projects began to take place, and the Industrial Revolution, which started in England, began to spread onto France. Haussmann began with a topographical map, splitting the city into 3 sections, and began working on it according to priority.
He began his work in the center of Paris and worked his way outwards. Ideas for his designs came from École des Beaux-Arts, a national school of fine arts in Paris. The streets were created using a grid system, making them mathematically precise, and were widely landscaped, making them very spacious.
He destroyed buildings and slums to make room for his projects, which included 90 miles of private and civic structures, 4,400 acres of parks and gardens, and an isolated section of the town for street fighting, which was very popular at the time.
Schools, libraries, and churches were also built along the way. Not only did Haussmann develop the upper ground of Paris, he had underground projects as well. He built a huge sewer system 354 miles long.
Even though his main focus was to make Paris a convenient place for living, he wanted to have a sense of homeliness and familiarity as well. This was accomplished by adding little details such as light poles and benches.
Although the changes he made to Paris were very beneficial to the city, he was let go in 1870 because the cost of his projects was too much. Also, many Parisians did not find the new city as appealing. Poet Charles Baudelaire witnessed these changes and wrote the poem The Swan in response to the destruction of the medieval city in the name of progress. Old Paris is gone. No human heart changes half so fast as a city's face. There used to be a poultry market here. In one cold morning, I saw a swan that had broken out of its cage. Webbed feet, clumsy on the cobblestones. White feathers dragging through uneven ruts, and obstinately pecking at the drains. Paris changes, but in sadness like mine, nothing stirs. New buildings, old neighborhoods turn to allegory, and memories weigh more than stone.
Haussmann's transformation of Paris brought upon many controversial issues and concerns. Many believe that it encouraged social hierarchy because the city renovations led to the increase in rent, forcing poorer families to move farther away from the city.
The economy was greatly impacted by the way shops and houses were placed, shops being on the bottom and apartments on top. Businesses benefited from this because it reduced the distance between products and consumers.
Since elevators did not exist at the time, the rich tended to live towards the bottom and the poor on top, which was another example of the creation of social hierarchy.
Haussmannization had some downfalls, but it did overall improve the quality of life in the city. Its improvement in organization and sanitation ceased the spread of disease and improved traffic circulation as well. The new buildings were also more functional than the previous ones.
The advance in technology and creation of steam-powered machines also took a major role in the development of the city. Housing these machines were factories, which drastically changed the organization of labor.
The creation of assembly lines in which every individual specialized in a specific task played a significant role in speeding up the process of producing. The creation of roads in the grid system allowed people and products to be transported anywhere as quickly as possible.
These improvements led to the creation of public inspections, such as building owners being required to regulate facilities every 10 years and the maintenance of sewers. It also led to better communication through railway stations and crossroads.
Haussmann's plan for Paris not only benefited Paris, but other cities as well. Recognizing the benefits of the organization of Paris, American architect Daniel Burnham used Haussmann's plan and diagonal street design for his plan of Chicago. Parts of other cities, such as London and Moscow, were also influenced by Haussmann's plans.
The 19th century brought a shift in socio-economic theories, medicine, and industrialization, and all these aspects radically impacted the standard of living. These came into being through the Industrial Revolution, which started in England and spread to the rest of Europe, and beyond the confinement of the continent.